Hi, I'm Michele Meyer. Welcome back. Last week I discussed what dissociation might feel like and gave you examples of what it might look like. Today, I would like to teach you the physiology of dissociation. What's actually happening in the brain that creates this dissociation. And I'm going to talk to you about different parts of the brain, in what order they develop. And this is just a quick and dirty brain development, right? This is for our purposes to teach you how the brain functions while it's experiencing complex PTSD, while it's experiencing childhood trauma. The first part of the brain that develops is the brainstem. It is an unconscious part of the brain. It controls everything we don't have to think about. So our heart pumping, breathing, digestion, all of these functions that we don't have to think about. Next is the amygdala. It's an unconscious part of the brain. Its job is to keep us safe by alerting us to danger. It's reactive only, and the amygdala releases chemicals that send us into fight, flight, or freeze to be able to handle that danger. It stores implicit memory, trauma responses, and survival traits. The amygdala is the part that creates the dissociation. The amygdala says we are unsafe. The chemicals are sent out for fight, flight, or freeze, and in that process, that's where dissociation happens. When we were cavemen millions of years ago, we had no language available to us. In order to find out if we were safe in our environment, we used our senses. So smell, touch, taste, hear, feel. We would leave the cave and find out if we were going to be able to hunt that day or were we going to be hunted. If the amygdala decided we were safe and we were able to go out, we used our senses to evaluate the environment. When we're children, the first 7-8 years of our life, we use our senses to evaluate our environment. It's the same thing as we did prehistorically. When we're about 7 or 8, more cognition starts to develop and we can actually think through a process, put ideas together. But until then, we are only scanning our environment through our senses. That's why the grounding technique of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is so important, that we can teach our system when it feels certain things through its senses, there actually is safety. Instead of being triggered into this dissociation where we're told we're unsafe, whether we are or not. The next part of the brain is the hippocampus. These chemicals, adrenaline, cortisol, norepinephrine, certain hormones, those are released, puts us into fight, flight, or freeze. Those chemicals go into the hippocampus. And the hippocampus is a subconscious part of the brain. It's supposed to store long-term memory and connections between traumas and triggers. The hippocampus can't handle too much cortisol. Cortisol breaks down the cells in the hippocampus, so the hippocampus can't develop properly. So these things that we're supposed to be connecting, traumas and triggers, they don't connect right. Imagine that your brain has 1 million file cabinets in it, and everything we experience, see, feel, touch, all of the everything goes into these different file cabinets. When we're actually experiencing a trauma, what can happen is, because the hippocampus is damaged and can't connect the two together, let's say my abuser wore a red shirt. So my abuser is going to go into one file and a red shirt is going to go into another. And so I might be walking as an adult down the street and see someone in a red shirt, and all of a sudden I'm triggered because I see this red shirt that's in this file cabinet that's marked unsafe. And now I've flown into a rage or depression or shame. There's some sort of trauma response that I'm having over this red shirt, and I have no idea what's going on, because this is all happening subconsciously in this part of the brain. And the amygdala has already taken over and said, this red shirt is unsafe. And that's an unconscious part of the brain. I don't get to access that. I'm already in a trauma response. I had no choice. Going back to the amygdala, when the amygdala tells us we're unsafe and it starts releasing these chemicals for fight, flight, or freeze, our prefrontal cortex shuts down. And the prefrontal cortex stores logic, judgment, understanding, attention, planning, representational memory, self-control, and self-regulation. So it's all the executive adult part of our brain that can function in life. Well, when the amygdala says we're unsafe, these chemicals are released. It shuts down the prefrontal cortex, because now all the system is concerned with is fight, flight, or freeze. Can I leave this situation? Can I fight it? Or do I have to go into freeze mode? All these chemicals prepare the body for those responses. As the amygdala is releasing the chemicals to fight, flight, or freeze, that is when dissociation happens. The system, because it's in unsafe mode, actually has to leave. It's a protection that our bodies have built inside without our permission. It gets activated. So if we're experiencing a trauma, our little brains and bodies are not designed to handle it. And so we have to leave our bodies. That's dissociation. And I believe in that dissociation, an inner child is born. The child that is experiencing the trauma at whatever age has to leave, and so they leave, and a new inner child shows up for them, one that can actually function a little bit. The trauma is stored in that child, and she's the inner child. And a new inner child shows up to take on the rest of our lives. And the inner child that experiences the trauma is frozen in that place, in that time. And that's why it's so important that we work in all 5 bodies: mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, and energetic. It's important that we release those inner children and their trauma through our 5 bodies. Healing is not linear. There's no rhyme or reason for it. We get dissociated, we get triggered, we don't understand why. Things are happening. We feel like we're back in the trauma with flashbacks, body memories, feeling memories, and those are the children that need to be healed. And when we're assessing dissociation and we recognize that we're dissociated, then we can do grounding tools to come back, be in our prefrontal cortex, and be able to heal in our adult brain to help ourselves. Now we have power only in the prefrontal cortex. We have no power otherwise when we're dissociated. Inner children need to be healed in all 5 bodies: mental, emotional, spiritual, energetic, and physical. And when we dissociate, we can't access any of those bodies. We're just having trauma responses and trauma reactions, just trying to find some way to bring us back to safety. And that's what these trauma responses and survival techniques are about. It's about trying to find safety however the child can. Trauma healing is very complex. My hope is that you will get to know yourself a little better and understand that your reactions and your responses, the things that you can't control, the things that you can't pray away, are not your fault. They are reactions to trauma, and the system is just trying to get back to safety any way it can. And when we're little, between 1 and 7, we only have our senses to evaluate that environment. So we watch people's body language, we listen to the tone of voice, we watch their mood shifts, and through those senses, we create what's called codependency. And that's to try to get us back to safety any way it can. Do I need to people please this situation? How can I make them feel better? What can I do for them to make me safe? And codependency is really just trauma responses. It's born out of trauma. Our system just wants to be safe. Thank you so much for being here with me again. If you want to reach me at all, just comment down below. You can email me, and I will see you later. Have a great week.